But why do they even still exist? What function are they serving now other than getting in the way and protecting their own interest?
Well, see, it's not a hard conversation to have because, Max Kellerman, first of all, let me say this. I agree with you. I get where you're coming from. This is not one of those situations where we're debating on this because we're not on opposite ends of the spectrum here. But I think your brilliance, sometimes is tinged by your emotions. And it gets, I can't believe I'm the one saying that, but it's true, Max. And sometimes it gets the better of you. Like, for example, you're coming from an altruistic point of view when we talk about why the existence of the NCAA. I'm dealing from a realistic point of view. They exist. They're going to exist. They're not going away, Max Kellerman. And you have to deal with that. And that's the reality of the situation. And so when you look at the NCAA, and I don't believe that they did the wrong thing here. Could they have done more? Sure. But I think the real big issue, which Rich Paul himself identified with his op-ed in the Athletic, he pointed out how he didn't really have a problem with some of the other things. The real issue was stipulating and mandating that an agent had to have a 4-year degree. That was where it tinged along racial lines and what have you, because what you have is a situation where some of these athletes, most of these athletes playing college football, college basketball, which are obviously the two revenue-generating sports in collegiate athletics, these individuals usually come from disenfranchised communities. And the fact of the matter is, even though somebody else may be college educated or whatever, maybe an intellectual, whatever the case may be, they're not necessarily the individual that those athletes particularly trust. They might have a relationship with somebody that's from their culture, that they identify with culturally, that may lack a 4-year degree and what have you. And that obviously, Rich Paul and others have proven you don't necessarily have to have a 4-year degree in order to be an exceptional agent. So the NCAA stipulating that, they had, some people sit there and say, what the hell are you thinking about? But here's where it gets tricky, Max Kellerman. Go to the NCAA page. I have it right in front of me, and I'll read this part to you. The Commission on College Basketball has been established by the NCAA Board of Governors, Division I Board of Directors, and NCAA President to fully examine critical aspects of Division I men's basketball. The commission is strongly encouraged to identify bold legislative policy and structural modifications, et cetera, et cetera. Who's on this committee, Max Kellerman? Condoleezza Rice, Grant Hill, Mike Montgomery, the Admiral David Robinson, Gene Smith, the athletic director of Ohio State, and various others. Okay? What I'm saying to you is you actually had African Americans that made the recommendation to the NCAA that the NCAA ultimately took heat for adopting. And so when we talk about things and we're willing to go that route and we're talking about it, well, racial discrimination, and you're not paying attention to disenfranchised individuals and the plight that they experience and they endure and what they have to do to overcome it and the people that they choose to trust. Now you're trying to literally monopolize that or create some kind of rules and lines to make sure that you're okay with it. Well, African Americans assisted in making the recommendation to the NCAA. So now when we recognize that, we have to ask ourselves a question. Where is this coming from? And why would they make those recommendations? And what's the impetus behind it? I'm not saying I have the answers. What I'm saying to you is that as simplistic as it is to go the route of the NCAA, let's take into account that they allowed a committee to be formed, rife with African Americans, highly intelligent, highly accomplished, that looked at the problems permeating through college basketball in particular, and they made this recommendation to the NCAA. Well, I think it's a mistake for us to zero in on just the NCAA. We have to look at that committee. We have to hear from the Condoleezza Rices, the David Robinsons, the Grant Hills of the world, and others to hear what was the motivation behind this. Why did you make this decision? And ultimately, why did you change your mind? Or why did you encourage the NCAA to change their mind and modify what decision they adopted?
Yeah. I think the details that you bring up are important. It's not that they're not important, and it should be examined. This is what I'm saying. Rich Paul has to know, and he does know, as you've spoken to him, I've spoken, Rich Paul's not shy about this, but he has to know. There's backlash against him, mainly because he's young, black, and rich, right? There's going to be backlash. But also because in order to be rich, as a young black man, he had to be very successful. He had to be good at what he did. he also uses his own celebrity to generate more kind of coverage of him, which gives him more power to represent his clients, right? And isn't it interesting when this happens for the first time with a young black agent who does not have the 4-year degree, suddenly the backlash comes not toward him, but toward anyone who may be in his same situation in the future. Isn't that interesting from a broad point of view?
It's interesting. It's very interesting. But what I would caution you and everyone else outside the black community to recognize is the fact that, excuse me, when we're willing to simplistically throw out, he's young, he's black, he's rich. I'm sorry, I don't think it's that simple. Obviously, his relationship with LeBron James and the influence that they wield might have something to do with it. But what I would remind you of, there's an individual that now passed away. His name was Henry Thomas. He represented Chris Bosh and Dwayne Wade and those boys. He was highly accomplished. Bill Duffy, he's an elder statesman, but a black man, an incredible agent, highly successful. The Goodwin brothers, Aaron and Eric, these are black individuals that are highly successful. You look in the NFL, there's a few brothers in the NFL. There's some brothers on the come up in the National Football League as agents. So listen, they're not having these problems. So let's be careful by just bringing up race, because that may not be all that it has to do with it, because there's a whole bunch of black agents out there that got their problems, no question about it, but it ain't just because they're black.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.